Hey everyone, it's Shay here from Pro EMP, and today I'm going to be taking you through my top 5 plugins of summer 2018. I'll be breaking this down into 5 sections, so I'm going to have one plugin that's an EQ, one plugin for compression, one plugin for saturation, one for spatial effects, and one I'm going to call the wildcard. So let's start off by looking at the EQ. So my first EQ is the Solid State Logic version 6 native, the X EQ. Now this is quite new to me. I acquired these around about a month ago, and this has quite quickly become my go-to equalizer. The reason for this is, one, it sounds amazing. It sounds colourful if you want it to be colourful, but it can also be very surgical. And the main reason I love this EQ is because of the various curve amounts that you can have for shelves and bells. I've got all of these different low pass and high pass filter curves with explanations as to what they're doing when they're doing it. And not only that, the best ones are really when you get to the bell curves, because you have all of these different styles of bell curve. So you've got classic symmetrical, classic asymmetrical, proportional 1, proportional 2, proportional 3, constant Q asymmetrical, constant Q asymmetrical R, constant Q invert, and constant Q new. Now all of these are very different in their styles. They're not just standard widths and controls that you can have. It determines how wide the Q is dependent on your volume, whether you're raising or minimizing volume. I also love the analyzer within this plugin. It's very responsive. And you have this parallel button, which basically puts it at a 50-50 rating. So it's only adding 50% of this. So it's a very quick and easy parallel EQ. You've got gain in and gain out, which is excellent to see on a plug-in EQ, something that you would kind of expect to see nowadays on a plug-in EQ. This has kind of taken over from the FabFilter Pro Q for me, just because of its general tone. I love the look of these plugins, and this is definitely one to look out for. The second plugin, this is our compressor plugin. Again, I've chosen the SSL native bus compressor. This isn't a paid advertisement for SSL. It's just I have these plugins now and I really do think these are amazing. Now this compressor at the moment is both stereo and mono. You can have a mono version and a stereo version. It's normally just known as a stereo compressor because it's the bus compressor from Solid State Logic. However, you can have this in a mono configuration, which is why I've opened the mono version. This is the best emulation of the SSL bus compressor that I have heard ever, really. All of the other emulations that you can get from various other companies are still very, very good. Most of them are very, very good. And they do have that SSL glue quality to them. But none of them are quite like this one. This one sounds just like an SSL bus compressor. Now, I've used many bus compressors from SSL in the past. They all have sounded slightly different to each other, but you know it's an SSL sound. I even went as far as to making an SSL clone compressor a few years back, just because I love the sound of it so much, and I've really wanted a plugin to capture the sound of that real SSL. I've used all the other ones from UAD, I've used them from Waves, I've used them from a lot of other manufacturers, and I do really like them, but this one just takes over for me completely. It sounds so much like a real SSL hardware compressor. So the next one we're looking at is a saturation plugin. Now, surprise, surprise, I've gone for the SSL again. I did used to use a lot of other saturators. I've used the Slate Digital saturators, which I still find amazing. I still think they're very, very good. I liked the FabFilter Saturn. There's so many others. There's ones from Audified, which I think are excellent plugins as well for adding distortions and sort of that valve sound. But since getting the SSL native, this saturator just takes over all of the others, really because of its versatility and its simplicity. The 5 main controls you have a depth, harmonics, second or third order, you have a drive, a dry and wet mix, which is extremely handy, and then a shape, which is kind of like a tilting sound. So the higher up you go in shape, plus 50%, it's more of a high frequency dependent sound. And the lower you go, it dulls off the high end. You've got a plus 6 dB here, but this is one of the best sounding saturators that I think I have heard. This saturator plugin is in one of my other videos, which I will link down at the bottom of this video, which is using this to bring life into sort of boring and basic drum sounds, where I take an Apple loop that is a standard Apple loop and try and give it a bit more life and a bit more usability. This is an excellent, excellent saturator plugin. And again, I'm not being paid by SSL to do this. This is something that I have used over the past couple of weeks and now has taken over all of my saturation plugin duties. Next is our spatial effect. And this is not going to be an SSL plugin. This is the Black Hole by Eventide. Now, I love reverb. I think a sound without reverb is not a sound. I love space around sounds, and I love creating atmospheres around sounds and putting sounds in environments. And this reverb is one of the best reverbs that I have heard for creative purposes. You have the Verb Suite Classics from Slate Digital, which is an excellent reverb. You've got the Valhalla reverbs. You've got UAD's versions of reverbs with modelled reverbs like the EMT plates. But this, for me, is one of the better, more fun reverbs to use, really, because of this gravity control here. This can give you some excellent sound design possibilities, down to this freeze button, the kill switch, the hot switch, and the depth of your reverb, the feedback. You can add resonance to it. It's got a built-in EQ for the low and the high. This is a very, very usable reverb plugin. Lastly is our Wildcard plugin. Now, this plugin I've used for around about 2 years solid. It's been a staple in nearly all of my production sessions, all of my mixing sessions, and most recently a lot of my mastering sessions. It was for a very long time in my mastering sessions, and then I stopped using it for the purpose of mastering, and now it's kind of crept back into that signal flow. And that is the Virtual Mix Rack from Slate Digital. Now, this plugin I think is a must-have for anyone that is into good sound and wanting to get an analog sound in a sterile in-the-box environment. I really like what they've done with this new version as well. On the older version, you didn't have these channel strips that you could select as you opened the plugin, whereas now in this new version, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 channel strips that you can choose from. So we have a mix bus, of which you can change. It gives you 8 to start with, but then you can take those out and put your own ones in. So I've got a mix bus preset. I've got a channel strip preset. I've got one I've called Vibe, which is things like saturators, EQs, compressors. I've got one for low end, which just adds absolute body and just sustain to the low end. I've got a classic channel strip, which is from the original factory presets that you get within this, because it is a very nice preset. I've got the other channel strip that was the other version from the factory set. And then I've got one called Kick Drum, which I used on a kick drum sound in a lecture for ACM. I no longer have the license for this. This, once you updated it, it gave you 2 weeks free to use the mic models. And I used an SM57 on a kick drum, and it sounded absolutely immense. It was a new kick drum. Sadly, I don't have these anymore. I'm thinking of buying the new ML2 microphone just to get hold of some of these mics, to be honest, to use as plugins to give a certain tone to the sound. The new API, or the FGA, should I say. I mean, we all know it's an API equalizer, but this version of that, the FGA, is a really nice smooth EQ. This has started to crop up quite a lot in my processes, especially when it comes to sound design on synthesizers and things that have a quite harsh top end, because you can smooth the top end off with this quite nicely, but you can also give something some edge with this. Another plugin I like from here is the FG Bomber. Now, this I only use one preset on all the time. Now, I'm not a very big preset guy. I do like to tweak my sounds and use my own ears to sculpt a sound, but I do find this one is absolutely brilliant on the Mix 3D. This is in most of my mix bus processes. This will slot in somewhere in my mix bus signal chain. One more from here that I'm really liking is the London saturation strip, the Virtual Tube Collection. This used to be, before the SSL saturator, this was my go-to saturation plugin. I really like it. It's completely versatile. You've got an output section, you've got a mix. You don't have an input on this, you don't have an input gain. However, you do have this trimmer plugin where you can add and subtract gain going into the saturation. But this is an excellent saturator. It does come with 2 other saturators, which are the New York and the Hollywood. I found Hollywood to be a little bit too shimmery and glitzy, kind of Hollywood sounding, and the New York a little bit too middly and a little bit too choked, whereas the London is pure bass and quite gritty and sort of grimy, very London, which is kind of nice. They sound like the place, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So that's my top 5 plugins for 2018. We have the SSL Native X EQ, the SSL Mono Bus Compressor, also the Stereo Bus Compressor, the SSL X Saturator, We have the Black Hole from Eventide, and we have the almighty Virtual Mix Rack from Slate Digital. If you've got any other things you want me to go over in these videos, please just write in the comments. Please visit www.proemp.co.uk and I will get back to you with any questions you have, whether it's about one-to-one tuition, whether it's just geekery on audio. We will get back to you as soon as we can, normally within the hour. So thanks very much for watching. I've been Shay, and this is Pro EMP.